Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to run through the updates with the furlough scheme and the self-employment income scheme. There's been a number of changes over the last couple of weeks in terms of the additional measures that have been introduced. So we'll run through those points, pick up on those, and then there'll be an option for some questions and answers. I've got some questions already from a couple of people, so we'll try and cover those because they're quite pertinent and sort of the common queries that we've had coming up. So just as a brief reminder of what the furlough scheme is, what the coronavirus job retention scheme has been doing. It's been there since March, and it allows you to furlough employees but keep them on the payroll. So many people have made use of that and done that to a lesser or a greater extent, and it's allowed you to claim 80% of their usual wages, capped at the £2,500, also being able to claim the national insurance contributions and the automatic enrolment pension contributions as part of that. So there's now been a series of changes announced that will take effect in the coming weeks. Now, these have been announced at this point. Like a lot of the information that's been sent out so far, its initial press releases and the detailed guidance follows, but generally the detailed guidance is around the calculations and some of the intricacies of the schemes. So I think we can take quite a lot of the detail that's available and make our business decisions based on that. So let's go through what's changing and when. So the Chancellor has announced several important changes to the way that the scheme operates. The scheme will close to new entrants from the 10th of June. So this comes about that after the 30th of June, employers will be unable to furlough an employee who's not previously been furloughed for a full 3-week period. And that's where this 10th of June comes from. So from tomorrow, your employee needs to be on furlough if they haven't already, so that they can then have their qualifying period and therefore be eligible for the scheme beyond the 1st of July. The other important factor is that you won't be able to furlough more employees than you have claimed for in the period up to date. So if you've got 10 employees that you furloughed to date, that will be the maximum that you could furlough from July. The other important change is the introduction of the part-time rules. Now, again, the exact detail isn't available as to how this will work, but the Revenue have issued various scenarios and guidance, and what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to bring your employees back on a part-time basis under a flexible furlough, effectively. So up till now, it's been all or nothing. If you want 50% of your staff, you've had to make the decision between one or other of those members of staff, whether you want to furlough them or not. But employees can be brought back for any amount of time, it seems, any shift pattern, and employers will be able to claim for the hours worked, as long as you're keeping a record of what their normal hours would be. So you can see which period is part-time furlough and which part they're working for you. Employers will have to pay the furloughed employee in full for the hours they work, and then meet the cost of the national insurance and pension contributions that attracts. So the other significant change and the pushing the furlough scheme into the future that the government are introducing is the changes to the amount that you can claim. So from the 1st of August, the grants will taper down, and in August, the grant will no longer cover the national insurance and the pension contributions, but you'll still get 80% of the usual wages. September, we'll see the grant fall to 70%. And then in October, that grant will fall to 60%. And then at this point in time, the scheme is going to end at the end of October. So what does this mean if you currently have employees who are furloughed? If you've currently got employees that are furloughed, you do not change anything until August. You don't need to make any just particular decisions. The cost of that employment will be covered in full. However, you'll be open to the part-time basis, so you could opt to bring them back, and or you need to consider that there will be a point where their payroll costs do kick in, and therefore you will have a cost to employing that person then on. Apologies. So how can I bring an employee back onto flexible furlough? There are two key steps from July onwards. One of the key points with all of this furlough is the correspondence with the employee and getting the employees buy into this or agreement to this, because it is an employment law matter as well as it being a job retention scheme. So making sure that you have got an agreement in writing with the employees and setting out that working arrangement. Is important. Secondly, you'll need to report as part of the claim going forward the number of hours worked by the furlough employee and the number of usual hours that they would work. So that's where the additional reporting will come in and the additional information that might be needed. Okay, and we can pick up on some Q&As at the end of that if you've got anything, and I'll pick up on a couple of particular scenarios. The other point just wanted to pick up on is the track and trace, and what happens if my employees return to work and they have to self-isolate. Where do you stand? And I think as an employers, you need to be aware of this, and it is a factor in terms of considering how your employees return to work, and one, the safe working environment, and two, how you actually go about paying those employees if they then have to self-isolate. So the track and trace, it may mean that your employees and close contacts to those employees, so as that employees come back to work, they've worked closely with someone, and track and trace causes you to have to, or that employee to having to self-isolate, and maybe a number of others of your employees. Now, statutory sick pay is available to them. So while they're in self-isolation, they can claim the coronavirus statutory sick pay, and then employers can claim that grant to cover that for that 2-week period while those employees are self-isolating. If the employee can work from home, they shouldn't claim to statutory sick pay unless they have significant symptoms and are sick. So it's just something that we've got to factor into dealing with people coming back to work. So the self-employment income support scheme was announced earlier in the year, and was an 80% grant for self-employed individuals based on average trading profits, and it opened for applications in mid-May, and generally they worked well. It was a self-assessment type basis, and you were going on as an individual applying for the grant, and the revenue paying that directly. Us as agents didn't have much involvement in that, but we were able to at least assess and support you with that claim. But it was very much, you logged into your government gateway and the revenue told you what grant you should be receiving. So we've done a number of checks of that figure and an understanding of whether the revenue thought you were eligible or not. In terms of how the scheme's operated, so far there's been 2.3 million claims, with a total of about 6.8 billion paid out as part of this scheme. So it's another major scheme that's been put in place. So what's happening with the scheme now? The scheme's been rolled forward for a second grant. Again, an expected final grant at this point in time. And this will be capped at 70% of your trading profits for a 3-month period, with a cap of 6,570, and it will be paid as a single instalment. Who's eligible? The eligibility criteria remain the same. So a self-employed individual must have trading profits of no more than £50,000 and must receive the majority of their income from self-employment. And that's where we've had a number of people that have had problems where the balance of their rental income or their dividend income might have pushed them out of the scheme because actually their trading profits were low. But the eligibility criteria are the same. Can I apply if my work or income has not been affected? Along with all of these schemes, no. You will need to confirm that your business has been adversely affected by coronavirus. This is an important part, but actually we have a lot of clients that say to us, oh no, we haven't been affected. And actually generally in one way or another you have been. There does need to be an economic hit, but generally, one way or another, everyone has to some extent been affected by this. So, there is always the option of a claim. Do you need to have applied for the first round of funding? For the second? There's no requirement to have made a claim for the first round in order to be eligible for the second. So again, that is an option. If you didn't claim for the first, you can claim for the second. Am I restricted in what I can do if I claim a grant under the self-employment income support scheme? No, you can continue to work, and that's the main difference between this and the furloughed scheme. You can continue to work or try to work and make a claim. How can I claim for this new round of funding? As with the first round of funding, applications are going to be made via the online portal, and this is set to open in August. We're waiting for further details, probably that will be published on the 12th of June. And then in terms of, will there be any more rounds of funding? It seems unlikely, as it's been set, that this is the final, but everything is open. But as we see at the moment, this will be the final funding round. So now looking at some questions, please feel free to add your questions to the Zoom meeting, and I'll try and answer a couple of those live if there are any, but I've got 2 or 3 questions here that I'll run through that's sort of practical and have come up with it in a number of cases. So we might have covered some of them, but we'll pick up on them here now as well. So first one, will the fact that I've already been on the job retention scheme and claimed for 3 weeks enable me to go onto part-time furlough on the 1st of July, or do I need to be furloughed as at the 10th of June? So no, if you have claimed and been in the scheme, you've qualified with your 3 weeks in April, May, there's no need to be furloughed from tomorrow. The scenarios and the guidance is that that qualifies you, and then going forward, you can go on to some form of part-time furlough from the 1st of July and make use of that scheme. But the key to this is that if you have got employees that haven't been furloughed and you think you might need to furlough them in the future, tomorrow is the day that they would need to be furloughed from. So it is a key date if someone hasn't had their 3-week qualification period and you've made a claim on their behalf up to this point. Second question, does part of the furlough have to be regular? Does the part-time furlough have to be regular? The guidance I've seen is no. 2 or 3 of the revenue scenarios that they've published have shown that it can be flexible. It doesn't have to be certain days, certain hours. It's around when you need that employee, when are they working part-time, and then keeping a check of the hours that they've worked and the part-time hours from there. I'm guessing there will be some guidance as to the calculation of what a normal working week will be potentially, but yeah, I think it will be, if they're working 10 hours out of their 40, you can claim, you'll be paying them the 10, and you can claim on the basis of the 30 hours to the scheme. Okay, another question. I believe staff can come back part-time from 1st July, provided they are furloughed on the 10th of June. Can you explain how this will work for July's monthly payroll? E.g., could full-time staff return on days we need them, 2 days 1 week, 3 days the next? So yes, anyone that is furloughed on the 10th of June will be able to come back to a part-time furlough, and yes, it does seem to be that you can pick and choose your days, and it is the flexible furlough that we were hoping for, or a lot of people wanted the furlough scheme to be 2 or 3 months ago, where they have got 50% capacity, or they do need someone 1 day a week, but not 5 days a week. So yes, you are going to be able to do use them for the 2 days that you need and furlough them for the 2 or 3 days that you don't. What will happen in August, September and October? So yeah, that's the tapering of the scheme, and that's something to be aware of. The tapering down of the scheme means that the cost to you as the employer will increase, and from August you will lose the employer's national insurance contribution and the pension contribution, and then in September and October you will have the reduction in the percentages that you can claim. And I think this is quite an important point and pertinent for a number of clients that we've been speaking to over the last week or two over this, and it's something to be aware of where you are thinking about redundancies going forward. Now, specific employment advice I think is necessary around redundancy, but a number of clients have been working at reduced staff levels and actually have made their businesses or been able to do their work more efficiently, and have realised that perhaps they are overstaffed before this, and they've furloughed a number of staff, and therefore aren't thinking that those staff need to come back necessarily at the end of July, August, September, or into October, and that they will make changes. And I think it's something to consider at this time, whether you want to make those decisions and how you go about them. And in terms of the notice period you have to give people, that clock has started ticking in terms of when we think the furlough scheme is going to end. So tying in how that redundancy works with the ending of a furlough payment and the furlough scheme is worth considering if that's an option. But like I say, employees need to be on full pay, and there's various employment law issues that need to be considered when you are thinking about that. So I think that's a separate conversation for us to have with you and your employment law specialist or solicitor. Let me just see if I've got any. I've got a question here. Can you confirm the date the maximum claim for the number of employees furloughs going forwards will be based on? Looking at this scheme, I think the scheme basis will be the same. So it will be looking at the prior period, the prior month you're calculating it on. So whether they're salaried and have a fixed income, that basis was set as February. But then if you have a variable employee, it would be based on the average of 2019. And 2019 payroll year, and or the month that the payroll is running the previous year. So if you were doing July, you'd look back and you'd go, well, what was the average income for that individual for the previous payroll year, and the higher of that and the July 19 payroll would be what it would be based on. Another one here. I would expect that there to be mass redundancies at the end of the furlough period. Is it likely that the government scheme will be extended in some form or another? At this point in time, they've said that the scheme will end in October, and there may be more detail in the guidance that's set out from the 12th, but I think from that point on, we're probably going to be relying on other job support, income support benefits for those employees if redundancy then becomes that final position. Okay, that's the various questions we've had through. Hopefully that's been useful. I'll give it a minute or two. If anyone's got any questions, please do ask them now. You should be able to type them into the Zoom meeting, and I will answer them as I go. Okay, so as the tapering starts, are you still expected to continue to pay 80% but only be able to recover 70%, or can you reduce the employees' pay to 70%? Yeah, no, perhaps something I should have covered. This is that is the position in terms of the 80% is still the cut-off, and that you will start to have to fund that 10% gap. So you're not expected to pay them 100%, but the scheme runs that you can access the scheme if you're paying everyone 80%, but you can only recover 70 or 60% going forward. So there does become that cost to you of furloughing that employee. what happens if I need to bring a currently furloughed employee back before the 1st of July on a part-time basis? Okay, so in terms of the scheme, you can't bring them back on a part-time basis before the 1st of July, but the furloughing rules do allow you to have someone off for a furlough period of 3 weeks, bring them back for whatever period of time you like, and then re-furlough them. So it might be that if you did need to bring them back from between now and the 1st of July, you could utilise that. So as long as they've got that 3-week qualifying period, you could bring them back for the hours that you need them, and you wouldn't be able to claim for the period for the hours they couldn't work in that particular week, but you could say for the next 2 weeks bring them back, and you would have to make up the cost of the time that they're not working, or have some sort of agreement with them, and again that's dependent on their employment contract, and how you want to treat your employee at that point in time. But you could bring them back for those 2 weeks, and then from the 1st of July, yes, if you do want them 2 days a week, you'll be able to furlough them from the 3 days a week. But prior to the 1st of July, you'd have to use the rules around bringing a furloughed employee back and then being able to put them back on furlough, which we've had a number of people do in terms of using rotas or using, particular jobs have come up where they've unfurloughed someone for 2 weeks, they've done a contract, and then they re-furloughed them again, or they've needed 2 staff and effectively there's 10 staff, so there's been a rolling furlough. So 2 people are off for 3 weeks, they come back for a week, they go back off, and you roll that within the staff line. Okay, any other questions? I'll give it another minute or so. Hopefully people have found that useful. Like I say, the detailed guidance is expected on the 12th of June. As with all of these measures, there's been the initial, this is what we're going to do, and then the how are we going to do it sort of comes at a later date. But generally it's been clarifying points, and actually the headlines in terms of this is how we're going to do it, this is what we're going to allow. The revenue have issued, this is what you can do, or you can't do, in terms of you can part-time someone, and you need to keep their hours and whatever else. But actually how that's all calculated is what we probably expect to come on the 12th of June. Okay. I think that's it in terms of questions. If anyone has got any questions that haven't been covered here or want any input directly, please do not hesitate to contact either me directly or your normal member of staff that you have contact with, and they will either be able to help or direct you in the right direction within Knight's Low, so you can get the answers you need. But hopefully that was useful, and thank you for joining us, and I hope everyone keeps well. Thank you very much.